My name is Nellie, and I'm 63 years old. When my husband Harold passed away last year, I never expected to inherit $58 million. I definitely didn't expect my son James to demand I hand it all over to him. When I refused, he locked me out of his home, where I'd been living since Harold died. I had nowhere to go but my husband's secret estate. When James showed up to take it by force, he never expected who he'd find standing beside me. If you're watching this, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below letting me know, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you want to hear more stories about standing your ground when family turns against you. I was married to Harold Manning for 40 years. He built his business from nothing into a successful real estate development company, but you'd never know our wealth by looking at us. Harold always believed in living modestly. We had a comfortable home in a nice neighborhood, but nothing extravagant. Harold always said, "Live below your means, and you'll always have peace of mind." I appreciated his wisdom, though I never realized just how wealthy we truly were. Our son James is 38 now, a successful attorney with a prestigious firm in Boston. From an early age, James showed ambition. He was always at the top of his class, captain of the debate team, and graduated with honors from an Ivy League school. While I was proud of his accomplishments, I noticed his focus increasingly turned toward material success. Expensive cars, designer suits, vacation homes. Harold and I raised him to value hard work, but somewhere along the way, money became his primary measure of success. James always had a complicated relationship with his father. He seemed to believe Harold favored me, especially when it came to financial decisions. The truth was, Harold kept his business affairs private from all of us. Even I wasn't aware of the full extent of his wealth or investments. Harold would simply say, "The business is my burden to bear. I don't want it affecting our family life." After James married Andrea 10 years ago, he grew more distant. Andrea came from a wealthy family herself and had expectations about lifestyle that only widened the gap between James and his father. They would visit less frequently, and when they did, conversations often turned tense when money or business came up. 3 years ago, James and Andrea had twins, William and Sophia. I was overjoyed to be a grandmother, and for a while, it seemed to soften the tensions in our family. Harold doted on the grandchildren, taking them fishing and reading them stories, just as he had done with James. I cherished those moments, seeing my husband reconnect with family in a way he hadn't for years. Then, 18 months ago, Harold was diagnosed with a serious heart condition. The doctors gave him a year at most. The news devastated all of us, but Harold faced it with the same quiet determination he approached everything in life. "We all have our time, Nellie," he told me. "What matters is what we do with the time we have." During those final months, Harold spent many hours alone in his study. I assumed he was putting his affairs in order, but he never discussed the details with me. When I asked, he would simply kiss my forehead and say, "Everything is taken care of, my love. You won't have to worry." After Harold passed, I couldn't bear to stay in our home alone. James suggested I move in with his family, at least temporarily. Their house was large, with a comfortable guest suite on the first floor. It seemed like the perfect solution at the time. I could be close to my grandchildren while grieving, and James said having me there would help them too. I sold our modest home, putting the money aside while I figured out my next steps. I had no idea those next steps would lead to a conflict I never saw coming. The funeral was small, just as Harold would have wanted. Close friends, family, and a few business associates gathered to say goodbye. James gave a touching eulogy about his father's work ethic and integrity. I noticed several people I didn't recognize, men in expensive suits, who spoke highly of Harold's business acumen. They offered their condolences and handed me their cards, mentioning that if I needed anything regarding Harold's affairs, I shouldn't hesitate to call. I tucked the cards away, not thinking much of it at the time. 1 week after the funeral, we gathered in the office of Harold's attorney, Martin Goldman. Martin had been Harold's friend and legal advisor for over 30 years. I'd met him at various dinner parties, but knew little about their professional relationship. James, Andrea, and I sat in the leather chairs across from Martin's imposing oak desk as he prepared to read Harold's will. "Before I begin," Martin said, adjusting his glasses, "I want to express again how sorry I am for your loss. Harold was not just a client, but a dear friend." James nodded impatiently. "Thank you, Martin. We appreciate that." Martin cleared his throat and began reading the formal legal language of the will. I was only half listening, my mind still foggy with grief, until I heard Martin say, "And to my beloved wife, Nellie Manning, I leave the entirety of my estate, including all properties, investments, business interests, and liquid assets, currently valued at approximately $58 million. The room went silent. I thought I had misheard. "I'm sorry," I said. "Could you repeat that?" Martin looked at me kindly. "Harold has left everything to you, Nellie. His entire estate valued at $58 million. I felt the blood drain from my face. $58 million? That couldn't be right. How could Harold have accumulated that much wealth without me knowing? I glanced at James. His face had gone rigid, jaw clenched, knuckles white, as he gripped the armrests of his chair. Andrea sat beside him, eyes wide with shock, then narrowing as she looked at me. "There must be some mistake," James said, his voice tight. "Dad wouldn't leave everything to Mom. What about me? What about his grandchildren?" Martin shook his head. "There's no mistake, James. Your father was very clear about his wishes. The will has been properly executed and witnessed." "But this doesn't make sense," James insisted. "Dad built that business with the understanding that I would eventually take it over. We discussed it many times." Martin looked uncomfortable. "I can only execute the will as written, James. If you'd like to contest it, that's your right. But I must advise you that your father took great care to make this legally binding." The meeting continued, with Martin explaining various aspects of the estate, but I barely heard a word. Why would Harold do this? Why hadn't he told me? And why had he excluded James entirely? As we were leaving, Martin handed me a sealed envelope. "Harold asked me to give you this privately," he said. "He said you should read it when you're ready." I clutched the envelope, feeling James's eyes burning into me as we left the office. The drive back to James's house was silent and tense. Once home, James went straight to his study and closed the door. Andrea took the children upstairs without a word to me. I retreated to my guest suite, still trying to process what had happened. Alone in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, turning the envelope over in my hands. I wasn't ready to read it yet. Whatever Harold had to say, it would have to wait until I could make sense of this situation. The next few days were uncomfortable. James was noticeably distant, speaking to me only when necessary. Andrea's friendly demeanor had evaporated completely. I often caught them whispering conversations that abruptly stopped when I entered the room. I called my closest friend, Ruth, who lived in a neighboring town. Ruth and I had been friends since college, and she knew Harold well. "He left you everything?" Ruth asked, astonished. "And nothing to James?"